Hey everybody, what's going on? How we doing, everybody? We got Mike Albano here for.
Hey, what's up, man?
How you been?
Good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Just going through my materials a little late and realized I had all the wrong colors and some mismatched stuff, but I think it'll still work.
Nah, it'll be fine. You know, the good thing about this pattern is you could really change the colors to adapt it to anything. You know, any mayfly, not just the Hendrickson like we're trying tonight. So no worries at all. It's just the basic structure of the fly and construction of it. But feel free to change the colors as needed to match whatever, especially as you get later and later in the season, bigger or smaller. So.
All right.
Do you see everything good? Am I
Yeah,
something?
it's all
All right.
looks clean. You can see your hook. Everybody, all the viewers see it good. Oops. I don't know how that switched. So we're tying a Delaware
Yeah.
Hendrickson
So we're
emerger.
we're we're gonna tie a Delaware Hendrickson emerger, and this is a pattern by my late friend Mike Romanowski, who I posted about the other day, actually, who passed away suddenly last June, which was really tough. He was a great guy and an amazing fly tire. This pattern was actually in. He had an article in Fly Tire about 6 years ago now, in the summer, I think 2014, called the Delaware Dozen. This is one of the flies, and it's basically a clink hammer style fly that is a parachute, but like I said before, it can be changed. Um, all the colors could be changed to whatever you want to match it to. So this is obviously, since it's the beginning of the season, the Hendricksons will be here shortly. I know they're already in some parts of Jersey.
Oh yeah.
This is a good pattern to have in your box for the next few weeks, and you know, it's pretty easy to tie once you get going. Just show some tips and tricks, but again, you can definitely adapt different materials and different colors to match whatever.
All right. Well, you want to get us started on the
Sure.
time?
All right. Cool. So, in the vise right now is a Tiemco 2488. It's a curved hook. I like do a lot of emerges on this hook. This is size 14. Again, you can change it to whatever. You don't have to use this daiichi 305 or daiichi 1130 are good choices as well, as well as some of the other newer style hooks like fire holes and stuff like that. So I'm going to start. I'm using Uni 80 in Rusty Brown again. This is, you can use whatever thread you want. I like to keep it on the smaller side. Sometimes I tie this in like Vivus 14 aught. I'm going to start 2 eye lengths behind. And I'm just going to make a few wraps and take it all the way down to the bend. And I'm going to cut off right there. So the first material we're going to tie in, bring it back up a little bit, is the Shuck. And you can use zelon. I'm actually going to stay true to his pattern, to Mike's pattern. So I'm going to use some dark brown Antron, but I typically use zelon. I think it floats a little better. I'm going to keep the whole, this is a kind of a thin piece, and when I wrap it up, it gives a little bulk to the underbody. So when I wrap the Biot overneath, it's not super skinny, because these flies are not skinny flies, Hendrickson. So just right on top. Take a few turns. I'm going to bring it down to length right about there. And I'm just going to wrap right down the bend to about here. I'll take it back up and cover some of the butts. Any little pieces sticking out, I will nip off. Some people like to leave the shuck long to the end, but I usually cut it right when I'm done tying it in. About a little longer than a hook gap. It might be a tad too long. All right, so now I'm going to bring the thread down to the base of the tail. And that's where I'm going to tie in my biot. So this is a turkey biot, if you can see that. And I don't know if you tie a lot with biots, Paul, but I like to tie a lot with biots. We're going to do, you can tie them in two different ways. There's a little notch here on the side. I don't know if you can pick that up. But if you see that notch and it's to the right side, it's going to tie with the edge of the feather is kind of got a fuzziness as you wrap it. It's going to give you a segmented effect with like a little fuzzy rib. You switch and put the notch to the left, it's going to be more of a smooth body. It's still segmented. I actually prefer goose biots for when I'm tying in a smooth segmented. I took a fly out here to show everybody. This is just a little, let's see if I get a good picture here. This is a little parachute Adams style fly. And that's a goose biot. And I just think they have a little bit of a segmented effect when it's smooth because they have like a dark edge.
Yeah.
So I use the goose biots a lot for my 14s and 16s and 18s. And when I get lower than that, I don't even dub anymore. I just use thread bodies for the most part just to keep the profile thin. And bigger mayflies, I'll dub and I'll put like a rib of thread. So this turkey biot, though, we're going to tie it where the fuzzy rib shows. And what I'm going to do is just tie it in right at the base here. And then wrap all the way up to where I'm going to put my post. And grab my Hackle pliers. And I'm going to start. The camera's pretty close to this, so if I bump it, I apologize. I'm going to just start wrapping right at the base of the tail. All the way up the body to basically where my thread is hanging. And I'm using a very dark, almost black biot. It's almost like a dark rusty brown.
Sorry, I keep bumping on you. I have a olive brown biot.
It looks good.
So it's not quite the prescribed, but it'll get the technique down anyway.
Exactly.
As long as I'm not making people dizzy because I keep bumping my phone.
And if you just want to cut off this little fuzzy. So now it's important to wrap over it pretty good so it doesn't come undone.
Did you ever put like a layer of UV over top of the biot?
No. So I don't. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of super glue on the base before I wrap it over just to make it a little more extra durable. But I don't put any UV on biots at all. I only do that on peacock quills.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. And on the goose biots, there's like a waxiness to them that I think really looks like the natural. So, and they're a lot more durable. Peacock's really fragile. So that's why you'll see people sometimes rivet with very thin gold wire, or just they'll go back over with thread. If you go back over it with your thread, like if you're doing a quill Gordon, you make a little X spiral back and then spiral forward again, and you put UV or head cement over it, it actually makes the thread wraps disappear. So it doesn't even look like it's on there. It's a little deady trick that they do a lot with their quills. All right, so now we are going to do our post. And again, posting material, it doesn't really matter. It's really what you want it to be. Parapost, regular poly. I'm using Enrico Puglisi's trigger point fibers. I've been using this stuff a lot. I like the way it floats. I like the way it shimmers. There's a little bit of a shimmer and shine to it. And this is in like a medium done. So what I do, I actually put this on like I do spinner wings. I'll just put a wrap up. Just check where I am, make sure I'm right where I want to be. I'll make 2 wraps right over the top, and then I'll bring forward one piece and back the other piece, and I'll just make X wraps, and I'll go back over it. So that's 4 wraps right there, and then I'll do 1 and 1 more, and then 1 right around the front. So it's a total of 6 wraps on this. And now the fibers are pretty much in place, and I'll give it a couple of wraps just to gather everything, not really making the post yet. And then I'll put 1 wrap over the shank again. So now it's just kind of up. It's just sitting there. It's waiting for the hackle. So for hackle, I'm using kind of a loose size 14 olive grizzly, dark olive grizzly. I usually go a shade darker than this for the most part, but this will get the job done. You can use dun, and again, if you're trying to copy a different type of mayfly, you can use whatever hackle fits that pattern. So you can use saddle or cape, obviously. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this in, and I'm going to tie it right up to where the post is. And now I'm going to post everything together. So I'm going to go up about a half a dozen turns up. Try to keep everything tight. 1 more should do the trick. And then I'm going to go back down. And when I'm coming down, I try to make them a little tighter just to keep everything nestled right, and so everything stays in the right place. And then I'll finish off with a couple of wraps in front and behind. So now I have the post and the hackle all posted together, and I'm pretty much almost done. I'm using dubbing. I'm using a synthetic microfine dry fly dubbing in red quill, and you can use superfine, you can use rabbit, you can use beaver, you can use any fine dubbing that Australian possum, anything you really want. And you're really only going to use a little, because you're just going to dub a nice small thorax. It just gives a little bit of thoracic bulk. So all I have is basically, it looks bigger on the screen than it even is really here. I might put a little bit more on. We'll see how we do. You always want to dub on thread in a clockwise way, because most thread is spooled and has a slight clockwise twist to it. So if you're right-handed, Paul, you're right-handed, right?
Yes.
So as you're going over above and below with your wraps, you're putting more twist in. So it's always good to have good habits when it comes to thread control, and knowing what your thread's going to do. When you're tying different things in, you can make it jump one way or the other if you know what you're doing. So when you're putting on the dubbing in a clockwise fashion, then you're dubbing clockwise, it's going to keep it tight. So I'm going to start in the back, and really all I'm going to do is I want to just want to cover where I tied down the Biot here. And I'm going to go over, and now I'm going to cross. I want to just get a tiny bit more. And what's really important is the last turn of thread when you're doing parachutes. The way that I tie them off, everybody's got a different way, but the way that I like to do it is I like to make one turn and wrap it right around. So I'm on the back side right here. Could you see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because when I finish, I'm going to tie the hackle around the post. You'll see in a second. Okay. So with saddle hackle, if it's long enough, you can by all means use your hands. But yeah, you got to just make sure you get all the puglisi or whatever fibers you have, get them out of the hackle. Sometimes they like to twist in as you're tying, but I like to use these, rotary style hackle pliers for really just my parachutes. It's the only time I use them, but I think they work well. So I'm going to just attach right here, and I'm going to go around. I don't like the way that wraps, so I'm going to start over. Definitely do it, and don't be afraid to unwind the thread if you don't like what it looks like. Again, that first wrap is just not doing what I want. Let's try it again. All right, so now I took about 4 wraps or so. I'm going to take the thread, and I can come right around going below the hackle, but on top of the hook shank. And I just do that twice. And then I can just leave everything. Everything's secure now. And I can swipe back, and I just go right over the eye 3 times. I can go in with my scissors and clip out the hackle. And good fine tip scissors really help with that part. And I'll take my whip finisher. This might be tough with the camera in the way, but I will. I'll set my knot. Get off right there. Kind of adjust everything. And I usually make the post roughly the shank of the hook, basically the whole curve. And then I'll kind of go to work on cleaning up if I missed a few or the hackles got trapped right over here. That's anything kind of pointing down below the hook shank. I'll clip off. That's not bad. There's one more I don't like. All right, so that is the Delaware Hendrickson emerger, and it's a great pattern. You know, it's just a great pattern this time of year. But again, it's a clink hammer style, so it's sitting nice in the film. It rides low. It's an emerger type pattern. The trout key on it, especially, you know, not just in the Delaware but everywhere. And again, it's very adaptable to lots of different flies, lots of different mayflies, and it works well. You know, it was tough to see if there was any questions because the way the camera, my phone.
I've been checking. I haven't seen really any questions pop up. I see Trout Hunter 84 says he wants to fish it, and I don't blame him. My wife was talking to Paul Osborne, and I did not really see any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Let's see. Yeah, great sulfur pattern as well. You can change everything to match the sulfurs. And trying to see what other style. This is another clink hammer pattern. This is a March Brown.
That's nice too.
A little bit different. I mean, it's basically the same technique. There's more dubbing involved, and the rib uses kind of an interesting material. I know this was one of the flies I showed you, Paul, but I'll show you real quick what.
And Paul Osborne asks, is it the shiny side up with the hackle when you're wrapping?
Oh, you know, there's like such a debate. I had the shiny side down with this one, and it's slightly cupping up. You know, the school of thought, if you have the shiny side down and the curvature of the feather is slightly up, it just makes a cleaner wrap. It clears every time you wrap, it clears it for the next wrap, and you can have a cleaner wrap. But you also, the fish are technically seeing the better side of the hackle and the more color.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it matters. I know great tires that tie it both ways, and it's just like tying in hackle for a Catskill style dry fly. And you know, I think the Groberts will tie one facing one way and one facing another because they use two different they use two hackle feathers. Some people, it just the good side faces forward, so it's one of those things. It's really subjective.
Rich Stayfly and Jay came in a little late. He wanted to know what the posting material was, and I used Antron on mine, and you said you used EP.
Enrico, yeah, EP trigger point fibers, but you can use regular EP. You can use parapost, high vis. It's like an old school material that is very popular. There's really a lot. You know, there's so many different. But you know, these fibers, they have different consistencies, and some, you know, you might like one over the other. You know, some use McFlylon, which is I use a lot. It's this stuff here.
Wow.
This is a good material. This gets very matted because of the way it's treated, so you have to kind of brush this stuff out before you tie it in. And you might be able to see it's kind of matted. But there's lots of different materials you can use. And, you know, as fly tires, I probably have them all. And then you just kind of key in on one you really like, and then the rest just sit there. But, you know, whatever you got, it'll work as long as you can see the pattern on the water. And the key with everything is just proportions, and just making the thorax not too big, and keeping things skinny where they have to be, and not too long here, not too long there. It just comes with practice. I roughly, with my hackle, this one's like a little bigger than I actually would pick. I usually stay true to the hook, sometimes a little bit smaller. The only patterns that I like to go bigger on are bigger mayfly patterns. I like bigger hackle. Like this is a size 12. This March Brown. But then if you look at this parachute here, this is, I think, a size 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty small on the actual hackle there. But this is actually a McFlylon as the post. So, I mean, they look very similar, as you can see. I mean, you almost wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But basically a heat-treated polypropylene.
Frank Dockerty said he had some trouble wrapping the hackle around the post. Now, I'll say that's the first time I've wrapped a parachute post that way, where you wrap the feather up and then into the post, and then wrapped it down. I usually made a post and then wrapped the feather up later.
Yeah. I think it just gives you a sturdier platform to tie on. Again, I have a lot of fly tying mentors, and some that I know well, and others that I've learned from afar. And that's a Charlie Craven thing. I mean, there might be other tyers too that do it that way. I'm sure there are, but I learned that from something he did. And several years ago, when I wasn't really liking the way, or it was that my parachutes came out, or I knew it was like too difficult than it should be, I watched him tie a parachute Adams, and that's the way he did it, and it looked great, and I tried it, and it worked for me, and so that's how I do it now. I think in fly tying, there's lots of good technique that, for every type of thing you want to try, and there's lots of different ways to do the same thing. There's some ways that I think are poor, and that make a less durable or less appealing fly, but again, the fish probably don't care. But there's several ways to do it, to tie it really good. I think that's just one of them. But, definitely doing the post first, and then putting in your hackle, and then posting that up, that works, as well.
Now, with the hackle on a parachute post, I've heard different things for the sizing of it. I've heard also, aside from just doing, this is a size 14 hook, to do the size 14, but I've heard that some people like to oversize on a parachute post because it doesn't go around the hook shank like it normally would.
I don't like to oversize. I think, again, that's one of those subjective things. Some people like that better. I just like purely the look to really it be the same size. So I typically will size it to the hook proportion. So, or even slightly smaller, depending. This one is around a 14, slightly. If you look at the gauge that I'm looking, I have a whiting gauge, and the cool thing about the whiting gauges is it gives you kind of a range. And this was kind of ranging towards 12. So I would probably, if I was to do this fly over again, which this is just fine, but I'd probably go just a hair smaller. I don't like when it goes over the body. You can see it's like just about there. I could have done a tiny bit slower. This smaller. Mm-hmm. This one's a little bit better. Just barely. I mean, it's one of those things where, again, it's subjective, but I typically, the only time I like to oversize is on my bigger flies, because I just think like a bigger hook, it's heavier, there's more material on it. I like a little bit of a wider hackle profile. Mm-hmm. But that's it. Any of the smaller trout stuff, 14s down, that I usually keep it the same or slightly smaller. But again, it's preference.
All right. Does anybody watching have any other questions for Mike about this fly or anything else about tying or fishing it in general?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, in tying, um, you really there's good technique, and then there's also, uh, especially with natural materials. This one, it's not so much with this, but other patterns. Natural material selection is a big part of the. It's a big part of the process, and feathers and skins, they're all different. Hackle, and and most of us order stuff online, and I think online outfits are getting better at grading different things and picking stuff out, but getting good at picking out natural material, um, is definitely a big part of the game. If you like to do dry flies and you like to work with natural material. That's why I asked, a few weeks ago when Matt Grobert was on, I asked him about snowshoe rabbit and what he looks for in good qualities, because he ties a lot of great snowshoe stuff. And um, sometimes when I'm tying it just doesn't look the same, doesn't feel the same, even though I know I'm doing the same techniques. And it's because the foot is just, the hair is just not the quality you want. So that's a big part of fly tying, in my opinion, is natural material selection, if you're tying with those. And this fly, for the most part, it's just good hackle. I mean, for the most part, all the hackle is pretty good these days, and everything else is pretty much synthetic except for the Biot, which is hard to go wrong with the Biots. Sometimes with the Biots, you might want to soak them. They tend to be brittle. Yeah,
I've had a lot split down the
yeah,
like,
especially the dyed ones. The natural ones seem to, if you're using a natural color, like this is the natural goose, Canadian goose. And you got to use Canadian gooses for the bodies, because a lot of the goose Biots, which I like better for bodies, if I'm wrapping them with the smooth side, they're not long enough. So the Canadian goose Biots, Nature's Spirit makes them. They make a lot of the great natural materials, deer hair. But if you're looking to do bodies with goose Biots, you got to get the Canada goose Biots, because the other regular generic hairline or Wapsi goose Biots they're a lot smaller. They're good for like a prince wing or nymph wings and tails and antenna. So
yeah. I was gonna say my experience with goose Biots, and I've tried to tie them in, but they're all pretty short, and I don't get too many wraps out of putting them on there.
Yeah, this is the stuff you got to get. Canada goose Biot quill. It's long, and the Biots on the end are they're good for like a size 14. You might be able to. Now, you usually don't get a 12, but from a 14 down, and I use them like 14s, 16s, 18s. And then when I get down to 20, you can, a lot of times I'll just start to do thread bodies, and with a little rib, maybe not, with a fine thread in a contrasting color. I get away from, I don't love dub bodies without some type of rib in them anymore. I mean, I still tie them, but it's just my preference.
It looks like we got a couple of people asking you to tie another one if you're up for it.
Yeah, I can tie another one.
Yeah.
If we have time for you.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just sitting at my vise, just like everybody else here. And I would actually like you to re-explain when we get to that point, how you were saying about the direction of tying in the Biot and how it makes a difference, because that's something that I haven't quite figured out, and I've tied them in a lot, and I really like the effect of the Biot body, but I always seem to do it backwards. It's like plugging in a USB thing. You put it in back and forth 3 times before you get it the right way.
I know. I'll definitely, let me just make sure I got everything I need. Do another one? Okay, so again, it's a Tiemco 2488. This is 2487 with a down eye hook, but I like the straight eye for this. And I'm using Uni 8-aught in rusty brown. Could be whatever color you can use. I also like Danville Flymaster 6-aught. It's a flatter thread, so if you're tying something where you really want to keep the thread wraps flat, it's a nylon. and you can spin the thread clockwise and counterclockwise to spin to. You can do it with this too, but that will really, this thread tends not to, because there's a twist in it, tends not to lay flat like the Danville. So I'm going to go about 2 eye lengths back. And I do that just so I know that's basically where I'm going to put the post in. And I'm going to tie this back. And you can break it off around the bend, or you can cut off with your scissors. And bring it back up to about the hook point. Oh, there you go. I bet that hasn't happened to you.
What's that?
I cut the thread and everything fell off.
That happens to everybody. And it's refreshing to see the professionals have it. It makes me not feel so bad about myself.
It happens to everybody.
That was one of the great things about going to the fly tying symposium is all the guys that you watch and you learn from on YouTube, and you go and you see them at the show, and they're tying their flies and they're doing all the same crap you do when you mess up.
I know, it happens all the time. It's really just, you know, too hard, especially when you're switching threads a lot. You know, you kind of have your keyed in on that thread tension, and then all of a sudden you're switching to a thinner thread. All right, so you always want to square up the tops. This is just dark brown Antron, and like I said earlier, if you missed it, I usually use zelon for my shucks, but I'm staying true to Mike's original pattern, so I am using Antron. Right up top, I usually do 2 wraps, and then I'll pull to length, just so I have limit my waist there. And when you're tying back the material, I usually lift it up away from the hook and slightly towards me, and this way the thread pressure keeps it perfectly on top. I'll cover the butts a little bit. And I will cut this to about a hook gap. Slightly more. All right. So I'm going to put in the Biots now. So the Biot, I have 2 of them here. Here's this one. So when you're taking the Biot off of the feather, you don't want to cut them. You want to peel them. You can see there's little pieces of quill as I pulled it off. But because when you pull it off, there's a notch. Let's see if I can get closer. So the notch is to the right. It just indents a little bit. And if you have the notch to the right, you're going to have a fuzzy type ribbed pattern like that ribbing effect on the fly. If you turn it around and the notch is on the left side, you're going to have a smooth effect, which is like this. It's not raised, but it's smooth. It still gives a segmented look. It's just it doesn't give it a raised look. And I don't typically like raised unless I'm doing an emerger, because you know it's the shuck and there's lots of things going on with the fly as it's emerging, and so I don't mind it having like a ribbing type of segmented effect. But if I'm doing normal straight shanked parachutes, I like the smoother effect. So I'm going to keep the ribbing to the right. I'm going to bring the thread back down to the base of the tail, and I'm going to tie it in. And then leave my thread right around where I started it. I always use hackle pliers because they're just too short. Even the longer ones are short, so you really need hackle pliers to wrap this around. And I'm going to wrap it around. Starting at the base. Oh, twisted on me. Sometimes when you tie them in, they have a tendency to twist. So now it's tying with the smoother side, which is not what I want. So let me just reposition it. And it'll be easier. I'll just use a different one. All right. There we go. And you just want nice even spacing of the rib as best you can. And then just tie it off with the thread. I usually do about 3. I'll take a couple more securing wraps. And then I'll come in and just clip off any of the ends here.
Beathead Fly Fishing just asked what video system you are using because it's super clear. I don't know about yours, but mine is just an iPhone.
I am using just an iPhone. It is the newer one, if that makes a difference. So it's the 11.
Mine is
Pro.
the XS.
Okay, so yeah, the one
before that.
Pretty new. Yeah, the one before that.
Nothing too fancy, nothing too
Yeah, nothing
special.
too fancy. I have a lot of light. I do have a lot of light, so I don't know if that makes a difference. I have 2.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
I have a lot of light and a background screen up to help the focus.
And I do have a pretty good. I don't have. It looked pretty good when I tested it, so I was like, you know what, I'm not going to go ahead with the background. But as long as these 2 other lights I have back there are not distracting at all. All right. So next is the post, and I'm just going to cut it to length off camera here. I'm using Enrico Puglisi trigger point in a medium done. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to twist it. It's about a toothpick when you're pulling it tight like that's about a toothpick, and I'm basically doubling it over. You'll see in a second. So I'm going to take this, do a little counterclockwise spin. It'll make the thread jump back, so it'll sit right on top. I'll put 2 wraps over that, and I'll just check by picking up the front just to make sure I have enough room where I want. So I have enough room with the hook eye. And then I will take the front of the Puglisi and I'll pull it towards me. And I'll take the back and I'll put away from me. So it's almost like spinner wings. And I'll put a wrap over and then another wrap over. So now I basically X wrapped it in. I'll take one more wrap from front to back and another wrap going this way from front to back. I do those pretty tight, and now it's pretty much locked in. It gives you like a, basically like spinner wings. And I'll lift both up in the air. Right now I'll take one wrap in the front, and I'll keep everything together. And I'll just take 2 gathering, sometimes 3 gathering wraps right over there, about a millimeter up. They don't have to be right down at the base. And then I'll take 1 wrap in front. So now this just gathers everything. Keeps it straight up. It keeps it in 1 piece now instead of 2, as you can see. And now I'm going to put my hackle in. So I'll use that same piece, which is nice about saddles these days. They're so long you can tie, you know, several flies. And I usually just, you know, some people will fan out how much they want, and then they'll cut it, leaving little pieces of fibers so that it secures it more when you wrap those fibers. But I don't do that. I peel them off where it's bare stem. And I like to do enough so that it goes about a millimeter, or maybe a little less, more. So my first turn, when I actually wrap this hackle, I want there not to be any hackle fibers, because that keeps it a little more even. If you tie it up to the base where fibers are starting, it'll splay them up, which is not what you want. Not that the fish will care, but it's something just aesthetically I don't like. So I take about half a hook shank or so of fibers off the side, and I'm going to put the good side facing forward, and I am going to wrap twice and then pull the stem so it's not in the hook eye, and I'm going to wrap it right to the base. Now I'm going to start my post slowly, just kind of holding everything. And this is a tougher part in the beginning, because you don't know the tension that you need to do, and can go over, and it could just really annoy you. But as you do them, you get the tension squared away, and you can do them pretty easily. That's high enough. Now I'm going to go back down, and I make them a little tighter each time as I get down to the base, and 1 wrap in front. And that gives you a really nice, secure post. And I'll check. I have, you can see here, a little bit of bare stem. So I didn't tie it right up to the top, and that's going to help me when I start wrapping, that hackle fibers don't splay all over the place. All right, and now I'll bring my thread to the back of the post, and I'm using this synthetic called microfine dry fly dub. And this is, again, one of Mike Romanowski's. This is right from his pattern. I'm pretty anal when I meet tires. And I like to use what they're using, at least for the first fly or two, just to see why they pick that pattern. Because a lot of the good fly tires out there, they know the difference in materials, and they pick specific things because it does a specific thing. You'll see that in streamers. A lot of times you can substitute, and most times you can. But personally, I like to use what they're using, or at least see if I have it, and try to tie it with that. And then from there, after I tie a couple, if I'm like, you know what, this is a little too coarse, I don't really love this dubbing, it works fine. I like super fine better. But this is staying true to Mike's pattern. So a lot of times, yes, you can definitely improvise, use other things, other materials, and that's just fine. But just being me, I like to use, especially when there's a real pattern I like, by a tire that I know kind of knows his stuff and knows the difference. There are sometimes things make a difference, even in synthetics. So again, this is microfine dry fly dub in a red quill. I'm going to take just a little bit.
Beathead Fly Fishing asked, Do you ever use glue or UV on your post before you wrap the hackle?
I don't. I know that's a big like Tim Flagler thing, and you can absolutely do that 100%. It definitely makes it easier. By all means, I just don't. I've just been doing them for so long like this that they're really sturdy, and I'm just used to set in my ways. And it goes back to saying there's lots of good technique to do different things. There's some bad technique, but putting UV and making it nice, that makes a nice platform to tie on. So by all means, do it that way. I've just been doing this for so long. I'm used to doing it this way. The only time I don't even really use head cement. I'll do like two whip finishes. I use UV to coat strip peacock quill bodies because they're really fragile. I'll use UV in places where I think. Sometimes I'll put UV under the biot, not over the biot, but on the underbody to just keep it glued as I wrap. So if a fish eats it on the fly and the tooth nicks the biot, it doesn't spiral out. I didn't do that with this one, but sometimes I will do that. As far as posts though, I just don't do it. All right, so I'm tying this stuff on. It's just super fine, as you can see. I mean, it looks more than on the camera than it really is. I'll put a little bit more. I always spin. I do think this is important, is to, I've seen people like go back and forth with their fingers dubbing. Yeah, the way you're doing it, Paul, is the way it should be done, which is clockwise, because if you're righty and you're taking wraps of thread, you're always going clockwise, and it's making a clockwise twist in the thread. So therefore, when you're tying this stuff on, any dubbing on clockwise, it's going to make it tighter and tighter as you turn, as you wrap, opposed to loosening it if you tied it counterclockwise. So, all right, I'm going to start in the back, and I'm just going to go to where as you can see right there, there's a piece of the thread. Just going to cover the thread. And then I'm going to work my way back, just building up. And I'm going to hop over in front. And then I'm going to just do a couple of cross behind that. That's just going to fill in so the bottom is nice and there's nothing underneath. There's no gaps underneath. And I'm just going to tighten up this last piece. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and then make one loop right around the post like that. And what that's going to do is going to allow me, when I wrap my hackle, it's going to allow me to tie it off on the hackle on the post. All right, so I'm just going to snip off a little bit of the top of this because it's bothering me. There we go. All right, and now it is time to wrap your hackle. So by tying the hackle in, facing good side facing forward, or the shiny side facing forward, when you pull it around like this, it allows it to now the good side to face down. So I'm going to use, again, I'm using rotary hackle pliers for this, and I like to use rotary hackle pliers for my parachutes only for the most part. And now I'm going to start and just go right one under the other, and now I keep it down, pointed down like that. I don't know if you can see that, probably not. I'll try that this way, and I'm going to go counterclockwise underneath the hackle, but above the shank of the hook twice. Okay, once I do that, I can drop my hackle pliers and the hackle secured. And now I'm just going to sneak the thread right over the hook eye once, right over the hook eye twice, right over the hook eye 3 times. And now I'm wrapped 3 times around the hook eye. Now I'm going to pick up my scissors and I'm going to snip off the hackle. Just like that. And sometimes you could even because it's such a sturdy post, you could even bend it back a little and see how it gives you some. Let me try it this way. It gives you some room to do the whip finish without having to mess all that hackle up by pulling it all back. So I do 1, 2, 4, 5. The other benefit, I don't know if you saw that, but when you tie the hackle in counterclockwise, let me just get this one hackle here that got caught and trapped. I'm just gonna get rid of it. All right. And then I'll push everything back to the way it should be. So I don't know if you saw that, but when I was whip finishing, by using the hackle counterclockwise, when you're doing the whip finish, it pushes the hackle out of the way instead of trapping it down. So it's kind of a cool little trick. If you wrap your hackle counterclockwise, you can whip finish, and it just kind of brushes the hackle, just gets brushed away. Instead of if it was clockwise, you would trap over it. You really have to swipe everything up out of the way so you don't catch anything. And again, I usually do about the hook shank for the wing.
Yeah, I feel like my hackle on the wing did not come out as nice as the first tie. On this one.
It happens. Sometimes it could be the post. If the post is not smooth, it can kind of the stem can get kind of turned in there. And if there's something I don't like, if something shot up that I didn't like, you just go in and you clip it out. And I'll put it in. I'll put it in one of these and see if we can see. So you can see how it's nice and clean. For the most part, there was no hackles when I finished underneath. There was one. I got rid of it. Play with it. Everything's pretty straight. There's one hackle fiber actually I see that I don't like.
I don't like the way it looks from here, but if you look at it from the bottom where the fish will see it, I guess it looks good enough.
Yeah, and again, the fish don't care, but it's something that Charlie, and why I like Charlie Craven is fish, they eat eggs and worms, and it's about tying good flies. So that's why I like things to be perfect. I'm just a little bit of a perfectionist like that. But for the most part, it'll catch fish, and that's the great thing about this hobby and this sport. You don't have to be a perfectionist. You just have to have a good profile, and some people don't really care about that, and I respect people like that. I don't it's not a big deal. That's what makes it so great. It still catch fish, and everybody's happy. But and that's your finished fly. You have your thread. I'm sorry, your Biot ribbed body with the fuzzy side. Gives it that segmented look. It's a dark brown. I remember Mike telling me you really want to look when these Hendricksons emerge, they turn almost black. So that was the reason behind the really dark body. The thorax is a good red quill color. It's called red quill. It's a nice small little thorax. They have like an olive hue to them as they're hatching, and that's the reason for the olive.
I just got a little warning on top of the screen that says we got 1 minute and 40 seconds left.
Oh,
I guess they only allow it to be an hour long.
Well, that's perfect. Good timing then.
Any more quick questions before it shuts us down here? All right.
Hey,
well, we're back on now.
We can just wait. We can just wait a second. I don't know if anybody
kind of got cut off there.
Yeah, if anybody had last quick questions, but yeah, that's it. Again, you can use so many different mayflies out of this one kind of clink hammer style, emerger style, and I tie them up in basically everything for every type of mayfly. I'll always have a couple of these, but by all means, it's not the only fly I use. And hopefully some of the techniques I showed help. And it just doing it this way, it's a very clean parachute, which is how I like it, even though it obviously doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, it looks clean. It was a pretty easy tie.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I don't think anybody's on right now.
Yeah.
So,
but cool, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, it was great to have you. I learned a couple new things today, which is the whole purpose of this thing. So, thanks for coming on. I guess there's no more questions.
Yep. And then shoot me a message and I'll send this one out to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
No problem, Paul. Have a good one, man. Stay safe.
You too.
Bye-bye.